Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. I'm Mike from Lucid AutoWorks, and ever since I converted this Milwaukee 1/4 inch hex into a 1/4 inch impact, I've had an overwhelming amount of people ask me to convert the new subcompact to do the same thing. And by overwhelming amount, I mean about 4 people asked me to do it. But since I'm a sucker for new tools, I went ahead and bought one new in the box, so let's take it apart and see what I can do.
So let's start off with why you'd want to do a conversion like this. I have the 3450 on the left, and it's definitely the smallest from front to back, and you could really tell the difference when you have it next to another impact. The narrow nose makes it way more exaggerated, but overall it's a really small tool. Measuring them out, the 3053 that I converted in another video is 4.91 inches from front to back. The new 3450 unmodified is 4.3 inches, so any way you look at it, we're going to have a smaller tool than anything Milwaukee currently offers. The specs are pretty similar between the two, with the biggest difference being that the 3450 is just a 1-speed tool. It has a variable speed trigger, but there are no speed settings on the tool itself. Again, it's a light duty tool and the torque specs are pretty close. The 3048 gives 100 foot-pounds of nut busting torque, however they came up with that measurement, and 70 foot-pounds of fastening torque versus 3450's straight measurement of 91 foot-pounds. Now the 3450 opens a little differently than other impacts I've taken apart in the past. The motor stays in the half of the clamshell rather than coming out of the back before you open the tool up. There is this bearing captured in the rear on the opposite half of the clamshell, and I didn't realize that, so it made it kind of hard to open. If I knew about that before, you basically swing it open and pivot in the rear, and then you could lift the assembly up to slip out the gear case. These C-clips are always kind of a pain. I tried snap ring pliers like a lot of comments in my other videos said to do, but they didn't really fit in, or when they did, they didn't grab, so I resorted to using 2 picks butted against each other. It worked for me in the past and it's a lot less frustrating. Speaking of frustrating, I fought with this snap ring so bad, and it's honestly not my fault. I'm going to blame the snap ring pliers. And they're not even bad. They're channel locks. They're great with large snap rings, but they seem to really struggle with the small ones. The points go in at an angle, so anytime you put any pressure on it, it just kind of slides down the taper of the pins. If anyone knows a decent set for small snap rings, let me know in the comments below. I don't use them a lot, so I don't need like crazy snap-on or something like that. I just need something that's going to work on smaller snap rings. So once I finally got off the struggle bus, I could see what it needed to make this work. The new Anvil part number is 42-06-2552, and I got it from Great Lakes Power Tools. Upon first look, I could see that the wings on this new impact are longer than the original, so I dropped it in and it was definitely too wide. It was rubbing on the sides. So let's head on over to the mini belt sander, and I mentioned this tool before in another video, and it's great for any metal shop. It's only like 60 bucks at Harbor Freight, and you can get it even cheaper on sale. I took sweeping passes. It's got an 80 grit belt on it, and I just kept comparing back and forth until I matched the same curve. After a bit, I was really happy with the results, but looking at it a lot of times made me notice that there was a thickness difference between the two of them. You can feel the difference when you put the new Anvil on top of the impacting assembly, and when I measured it out, the original is 167 thousandths, the new is 183 thousandths, so I got to take off about 16 thousandths. So now I got to figure out how to cut this thing without a lathe. I have a lathe, but it's over at my big shop and I'm at my home shop, and it doesn't even really do the best with hardened steel. So I'm going to try to do this with an abrasive. So I figured I'd head back over to my belt sander, and I want to make sure the table is totally square with the backstop. I took the belt off and I was using a machinist square against the backstop, and you can adjust the little set screw to get it set in place. Once it was all set up, I needed to make sure I can hold the Anvil square, so I set it up in a machinist V-block. V-blocks are an extremely handy tool to have around a shop, and I'll put a link in the description for a cheap pair, and they should allow for a really consistent grind. I started out grinding it vertically, and I noticed a taper from the top to the bottom, so I flipped it around 180, I grounded some more, and I kept periodically checking it. But when I spun it horizontally, I noticed that I was getting more on the top than I was on the bottom. I was making the mistake of not putting enough pressure on it. The setup is square, but I wasn't fully engaging that backstop. You got to really push into it, and you almost want to bog the motor down. It also helped to do like a full sweeping pass instead of a light kind of ginger take. You know, you want to get in there and really take a lot off in each pass. Once I got that technique down, I noticed that it was cutting a lot more square. I was definitely surprised by the results and happy with the finish overall for, what's essentially a really cheap belt sander. Next, I just softened the edges a bit with a 2-inch surface conditioning disc on a right angle die grinder. I used a little bit of super lube on the anvil, and these new anvils have this little hole on the side, and that works great because before you'd put some grease in there and they'd get airlocked. You wouldn't be able to push the anvil down on the little nub, but the fitment was great. The anvil sat where it should be, and I don't think there's going to be any issues with it. I slid the gear case over the impacting assembly, and the rubber cap can only go on one way. It's kind of evident with this little notch that's cut into it. The cap has a curve that you have to have facing down to match up with the clamshell, and it also had this little green lantern looking design on the back that you have to align with the housing. Lift up on the motor slightly and it'll get it back inside. The two halves are kind of tricky. The rear bearing support kind of hangs this whole thing up. I didn't know it at first, but if you start with the back and kind of hinge it, it'll snap into place with a really satisfying click. Install the clip in the battery opening and you're pretty much good to go. Overall, this was a pretty easy and inexpensive project. It could be done without any real specialty tools. I'll put links in the description to some of the stuff I used. If you made it this far, hit the subscribe button. I think you're legally obligated at this point. I don't make the rules, you gotta take that up with YouTube. I got a lot of different Milwaukee modification videos on my channel. If you have any ideas for any other ones, leave them in the comments below. Keep grinding away on those projects, stay lucid, and I'll see you in the next one.